for joining today. Welcome. My name is Khaled Rocha. I am a financial advisor with JP Morgan Wealth Management based in Houston, and a member of the DLE Culture Chat committee. And today I'll be your moderator, so welcome. A little bit about the DLE. The DLE Culture Chat is an inclusive learning and networking forum where we examine trends, changes, and challenges in today's workplace. In just an hour, we engage experts to share strategies and tools for professional development that will contribute to your career success, regardless of industry, experience, or position. Our goal here is really to help you grow what you know as well on who you know in a welcoming and supportive professional environment. And without a fee, thanks to the sustained sponsorship of Dulye & Co. Consultancy, a leader in workplace effectiveness. So thank you, Dulye & Co. So we have a blend of DLE members and newcomers joining today from diverse regions, industries, and positions. So let's take a few seconds to connect. Please, in the chat box, we use this pretty often here, type in your name, your company, your title, and location where you're joining us from. And if you like, add your LinkedIn profile so we can help you grow who you know. Okay? So thank you for coming. We have a bunch of newcomers, so super, super excited to have you here on board. All righty. So a few ground rules, if you don't mind. If you go to the next slide, thank you. So for now, please stay on mute. You know, we don't want to get all this noise and everything. And use the raise hand feature when we get the conversation going to participate in the conversation. It'll be easier to manage. And also, since we're going to be on mute, remember to unmute when you are called on, so then it's more efficient that way. And you can also use the chat box for comments and questions that are relevant to the topic. We actually are very active on there as a way to connect. So as a reminder, the first 20 minutes of the program are being recorded. We'll stop the recording once we go to breakouts, because that's where we actually share and have the safe space to be vulnerable. So before we start, I want to give a quick shout out to my volunteers, committee members in the Culture Chat committee, who are the producers of the program today. Those are Josh Brilliant, Systems Tests Engineer and General Dynamics Mission Systems in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Aaliyah Merrill, filmmaker, ASM Productions in Durham, North Carolina. Allison Schmidt, Executive Director of E4All, Berkshire County in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Kate Abbott, freelance writer and editor at BTW Berkshires in Williamstown. Morgan Mayer, copywriter at Bridge House Media in St. Petersburg, Florida. O'Neill Carter, regulatory associate at Regeneron in Rensselaer, New York. Mishra Karuna, senior strategist and planner in Williamstown, Massachusetts. So thank you, team. Without you, we could not have done this. Really appreciate it. All right, now without further ado, let's introduce the speaker. Welcome, Hari. Thank you so much for being here. He is a communication expert and founder of Convivo, who brings us over 20 years of expertise in training and facilitation. He has coached hundreds of sales and business executives at Slack, MathWorks, and other competitive organizations in high tech. Harry holds graduate degrees in engineering from Boston University and communication from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Prior to starting his firm, he held positions of engineer, trainer, and sales storytelling coach at several tech companies. In 2020, he founded VoPros, a nationwide all-volunteer organization focused on border protection, now more than 2,500 members strong. So we're in good company here. Thank you, Hari, for sharing your insights and experience to help us improve our storytelling with purpose. We're really happy to have you here, and I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Khaled, Linda, the DLE Culture Chat team, and thank you, everybody, for joining this session. It is my joy and privilege and honor to be here. So a little bit about what's ahead. I'm going to follow a why, what, how framework for the content for our session. Then we'll get into takeaways and group discussion. We'll get into a little bit of why storytelling in the first place. What are some of the key elements of storytelling? We'll do a deep dive into how, what's the key to holding people's attention. And then the takeaways are going to be some keys to apply storytelling. By the way, thank you all of you for filling out your registration survey. Your insights actually help me craft the really special bonus takeaway that you'll all receive if you complete the session evaluations. More on that in a little bit. So let's get into the why. Simon Sinek recommends to start with the why. So let's get into why storytelling. What are the situations that where you face problems that really only compelling storytelling can solve? Here are a few. Let's say that you're meeting with customers or with clients, and this is a situation where you need to position your products or your services to your clients, whether they be external clients, an external customer, or even an internal department or a division within your organization. This is a situation that calls for customer-centric or client-centric storytelling. We'll get into a little bit more about what that is in a second. Or let's say that you're not looking to sell, you're actually looking to motivate. You might be at a nonprofit, you're looking to motivate your donors, or you're looking to motivate volunteers, or you might be working on a project team and you need to motivate your team members or staff that you're managing. This is a situation that calls for mission-driven storytelling. And another situation is interviewing. This is a situation where you're wanting to introduce yourself, but in a way that's really memorable and compelling. And that's kind of like the end point or the ideal outcome for all of these situations is you might have a lot of really convincing facts, a lot of really good information, but you don't want to overwhelm them. In fact, it's better if they actually say, tell me more. And that's the whole key here is that people will actually they will remember and they'll be compelled by your stories way more than they might be convinced by your facts. Of course, both are important, but you want people to be really curious for the facts, and stories help that happen for you. So, given that, how do we go about doing this? What actually is a story in the first place? Let's say we want to tell a story. Let's say it's a very simple story. Let's say it's a story about a knight and a dragon. I have a dragon tattoo. I love dragons. And knight and dragon story is like a very sort of classic story from folklore, something that many of us might be very, very familiar with. So if I wanted to start a story, what's a classic way to start a story? And folks, you can feel free to type in the chat if you'd like. A really, really classic way is once upon a time. Right? So let's say I go, right, Khaled, once upon a time, as soon as you hear once upon a time, yeah, your ears perk up. So let's say I start a story with once upon a time, there was a knight. This is the beginning of a story. The beginning of a story is where you introduce the main character. In this case, it's our knight, right? And so now we need to go to the middle part of the story. And absolutely, Alyssa, the middle part of the story is where you're going to see some action, right? So this is a story about a knight and a dragon. What kind of action do we want to have happen in the middle of the story? Some kind of fight, right, Khaled?
Yeah,
Some kind of
some
duel.
climax, some fight, something. Yeah, like a duel,
Yeah,
a
we need a duel between the
challenge.
knight. Yeah. So here's the middle of the story. It's going to be a fight between the knight and the dragon, and the knight is going to win. So the knight went and slayed a dragon. That's the middle of the story. So we've got our beginning, we've got our middle. Now I've got to end the story. A really classic way to end the story is, of course, everyone lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
This is very nice, right?
Yeah.
What do y'all think? Here's the most
Predictable.
efficient story, right? Three sentences, efficient, fastest story ever. This might be the fastest culture chat ever.
Yeah, but it's predictable, it's like, we all know these elements, right?
Yeah. Oh, so maybe is there something missing with this story? Something doesn't quite feel right about this story. Oh, I see a lot of disappointed expressions in the chat. Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, there is like some, curiosity factor, or like there's no hook, I would think.
There's no hook. Yeah, what's at stake, Elizabeth said. Where's the journey? Asks Trina.
Oh yeah, the
Okay,
character arc, love it.
Yeah, you're all absolutely right. This isn't really a story. In fact, this is a PowerPoint presentation. It's just got 3 facts on it, not even interesting facts. And so what's missing? And many of you have already indicated that. What's the obstacle? What's at stake? What's the why? Is the dragon even really a problem here? The dragon might have been minding, its own business. And then suddenly the night comes and she slays this dragon, and the dragon's like, hey, come on, what's up? Why'd you do that? Right? That's right. There's no suspense. So this is what I'm going to use to kind of take us into, a story is more than just the structure of the story. You might have even some of the formulaic beginnings and ends of a story, but that doesn't actually make for a compelling story. So what are the 5 key elements that make stories really compelling? Let's start with two of them: motivating tension and main character. Now, sometimes people refer to motivating tension as dramatic tension. I prefer calling it motivating tension because I really have found that this element, the motivating tension part, is really the why behind the story. And it provides the motivating energy that fuels the entire story. And these two together, the motivating tension, the main character, are the why and the who of a story,
Mhm.
right? What is the central challenge or conflict or gap, as people have pointed out? And why is that so important for the main characters? Let's take some examples from the movies, cinematic storytelling. Let's say it's a monster story. All right, here's a classic monster story. This is Godzilla. This is actually the movie poster from the 1954 film. Right? In a monster story, what is the central challenge? Well, Godzilla is going to come destroy Tokyo. So what's the motivating tension? Well, will Tokyo survive, or will
Mhm.
the monster win? Right?
Mhm.
And in fact, it turns out in a lot of monster movies, that's the central motivating tension. And the tension could resolve in one of two ways. It's possible that Godzilla destroys Tokyo. Godzilla wins.
Mhm.
Movie's over at that point. The motivating tension dissipates. It's over. It resolves. Might not be very satisfying or happy for us if we happen to be living in Tokyo, right? But if we're Godzilla, great. That's the end of the motivating tension.
Mhm.
Or, you know, in monster movies, we actually want to see the city survive. So then it turns out the whole story then becomes how. What are the plot twists? How are the folks going to figure out? Do you divert Godzilla? Do you kill Godzilla? Do you injure Godzilla? Do you get another monster to fight Godzilla? All kinds of ways to try to get the city to survive.
Mhm.
But then throughout the movie, we as an audience are really wanting to wait for an answer to this central question. That's why it motivates the story. Let's take a second story type. Let's say it's a love story. Right? What's a classic example of a love story?
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, of course. I've done these storytelling sessions now for the past 5 years in all kinds of organizations and companies, but also in lots of different cultures around the world. And it's so interesting. Every single time I do this, I ask, "What's the classic love story?" And everywhere I go, it's Romeo and Juliet
Uh,
that comes out. I've actually been to Verona. I visited the place where allegedly this took place. It didn't really take place there. Romeo and Juliet, what's the central challenge or conflict or gap? Well, you've got these two lovers and the families, are not going to let them get together. And so it turns out the motivating tension in the story is, hey, will the lovers ever be together? And it turns out in love stories, again, just like monster stories, you can resolve this in one of two ways. Either the lovers get together, in which case the story becomes a romantic comedy, or, spoiler alert, Romeo and Juliet, the lovers don't get together. And in which
mhm.
case it becomes a romantic tragedy. Right?
Mhm.
There is no popular adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. I've looked. There is no popular adaptation of Romeo and Juliet where Juliet turns to Romeo and says, "Hey, come on, let's be practical. You know, our families are never going to agree to this. In fact, my marriage is already arranged to some really rich merchant prince, kind of like that, actually. So let's just part ways." And Romeo
Mhm.
says, "Yeah, you know what? You're right. My cousin just told me that there's this new continent that somebody discovered. I'm going to go off to Amerigo." So Romeo goes off to Amerigo. Juliet marries a merchant prince, movie ends. We as an audience would revolt. We would throw tomatoes at the screen. We'd like, no, we want to see this get together. We want to see something happen. We want to see Juliet getting on a ship with her merchant prince husband going across, and it turns out Romeo is also on this same ship. The ship hits an iceberg. Oh wow, we've got Titanic. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So love story. That's the motivating tension in the love story. We want to know how the lovers get together. How are they going to overcome these obstacles? A third example, heist story. Right? What's the central challenge or conflict or gap in a heist story?
Ooh, if they can pull it off, right?
Right. There's usually the setup in a heist story is a little bit misleading. The setup is always, we see in the beginning part of a heist story, the supposedly impregnable vault. It can't be done. The security is too good. Of course, by the middle of the heist story, we see them actually break into the vault and get the stuff, whatever it is that's supposed to be impossible to get. The real motivating tension in a heist story is not, are they going to be able to get the stuff? It's, are they going to get away with the stuff?
Mm.
Right. So these are examples from the movies, but it turns out the same idea of motivating tension and main character plays out in everyday life as well. And in so many of our professional situations. You are the CEO of a nonprofit organization, and the federal government has just pulled your funding. 40% of your income has just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
How will you survive? How will your organization survive? That is your motivating tension if you're the CEO of an organization facing a real compelling challenge. Or you are leading a project team. The project is actually fairly important. You've got 6 months to go to deliver a new product. But your manager calls you into our office one day and tells you, hey, turns out the company's shares are slipping. The board is putting pressure. The C-suite has fast-tracked your project because a competitor has just released their product. You only have 3 months. And oh, by the way, their product is better. So you better figure out a way to improve the initial design.
That's scary.
You've not, yeah, right. Real situations. I've been there. Many of us have been there. And, in that situation, you've got to go and motivate your team with this new challenge. Right. So how do you do that? Let's get into the rest of the story. Those are the two major elements. Here are 3 other elements. But once you have those elements, how do you actually construct a story? You've got your main character, you've got your motivating tension, you know what the resolution should be. Now you need to have the what and the how of a story. And the real key thing is that your story cannot be a straight linear line between the problem and the solution. You've got to have some plot twists. And it turns out if it's our dragon or knight and dragon story, right? Some of those plot twists are you need to have an inciting incident, the moment where a problem reveals itself. And then you need actually the possibility of a solution, the turning point. But then we also need to see a montage of actually the main character coming up with the solution themselves. That's the plot twists. You also need supporting characters. Right? Some of the best supporting characters in stories are actually villains, the antagonists, right? The federal government removing your funding, your manager putting pressure on you and not actually giving you any support, right? Or your teammates who come alongside you and they're motivated by the same motivating tension, and they help you, figure out a creative solution that you couldn't figure out on your own. So we need those supporting characters in stories as well. And lastly, we need to be able to actually experience the story in those pivotal moments. You've got to kind of slow down the action in the story, and the audience has got to kind of feel the stakes in those moments. And that's what we're going to spend our last 5 minutes here, diving into a little bit. How do you actually tell your stories? This is the key to attention. Now, as a storyteller, and by the way, in many of your responses, some of the things you have described, like what motivates you, why you want to be a better storyteller, is you want to be able to hold your audience's attention. Turns out, by the time you have to ask for your audience's attention, it's too late. I have ADHD. I've really learned a lot about attention. And it turns out It's totally okay. We as human beings, attention is a second order phenomenon. Our attention just kind of wanders around all over the place, and that's totally fine. So it turns out that if you want to get somebody's attention, you've got to get them interested first.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to get somebody interested is to make them curious. Because curiosity focuses interest, and interest generates attention. So it turns out this is actually good news. For you as storytellers, your job isn't to hold your audience's attention. You can't. Your job is simply to make them curious. And scenes are what make people curious. Because scenes have two parts to them. The first part in a scene is a hook, is a curiosity trigger, something that makes them curious. Here's some of my favorite curiosity triggers. You might have seen this in the promo video as well. Imagine this. You're interviewing and the interview is going fine until, or there I was standing in front of a conference room and nervous as I'm about to start my presentation. So in a scene, you have that little hook. Imagine this, there I was, kind of like Once Upon a Time. And then you have these attention immersers. Ways of telling a scene, narrating a scene, where you show and don't tell. It turns out one of the big techniques there is to slow down the action and make the action happen in present tense and use a lot of sensory language to help the audience actually feel the temperature, feel the smells in the air, feel, hear what's going on, see the scene, paint it from their own eyes, so on.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, in my bonus takeaway, a lot of you in your survey responses asked for more information or techniques on how do you show, don't tell. The bonus takeaway actually is a deep dive into and a tutorial on how to build scenes, right? So if you fill out your evaluation, you'll get a special video from me that really walks you through the step by step.
That's awesome.
Now,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. This is I live for this. Let's wrap this up and bring it to takeaways. How do you apply all of these keys? Let's come back to those situations that I mentioned. When it comes to customer-centric storytelling, the key here is to really make your client the main character and not you. If you are wanting to get a meeting with that executive at another company or with the division head of another division within your organization, you've got to know what their motivating tensions are. What's their story? What drives them? What are the challenges they're facing? For a company, you can read their strategic plan and you will see the CEO having listed what her top priorities are for the year. But you've got to get curious. You've got to know what are the challenges that are driving those priorities. And then introduce yourself, not with your product first or your service first, but introduce yourself with perhaps a story of how another CEO like her benefited from your services or your product. Or say you want to motivate other people, to support your cause or to join your team. In mission-driven storytelling, you want to make the story be about a mission that's really worth caring about. Make it a dragon-sized problem that's too big for any one person to solve. And that motivates a lot of people to come together because it helps everybody realize everybody has a role to play. Everybody has something valuable to contribute toward that problem. And so make the story about how we're all going to come together and solve this problem. For interviews, right? Chances are there's a reason why they're hiring for a position that you're applying for in the first place. And chances are if you've made it to the interview, they've already seen your resume and they already feel like your skills are a fit. So tell them a story about what is a dragon-sized challenge that's relevant to them, because chances are they're looking for you to solve some big problem for them. So tell the story about how you grew through trying to solve a similar problem and how you solved it, but also what you learned along the way. Make it a relatable scenario that's relevant to them.